Hello everyone, welcome to the monthly NRHS Iowa Chapter YouTube slideshow. If you're interested in more information about the Iowa Chapter, please visit iowanrhs.com. There you can join the chapter or renew your membership and order any of the great products that the Iowa Chapter has to offer, including DVDs and photo collections. Please enjoy the program this month and consider visiting iowanrhs.com. Just a couple of quick notes before we begin this month's program. First off, this program is a re-recorded version of a program that I did about a year ago. It's of the Iowa, Chicago, and Eastern from the Larry Anglund collection. And this program, when I originally recorded it, I got a lot of comments about the sound quality not being great. So this is a program that is being recorded a second time and now being posted again with better sound quality and with a co-host. Noah Bolte will be with me today to help us navigate this program. Secondly, the Iowa Chapter Spring Meet is coming up on April 15th of 2023. This is our 70th anniversary spring meet, and you can order tickets at iowanrhs.com and clicking on this Iowa Chapter 70th anniversary dinner. We're going to do trolley rides. We're going to have, I'm not sure why this hasn't loaded quite correctly, but we're going to have the sheds open for walking tours. There we go. There's the Iowa Chapter logo. We're going to have a catered dinner, a business meeting, and Dawn Hofsummer, the founder of the Iowa Chapter, is going to be there to do a presentation for us that evening. So please consider joining us. The cost is $50 per person. You do need to order your tickets in advance prior to April 1st so we can get a head count for the caterer. Please go to iowanrhs.com and order your tickets for the Iowa Chapter 70th Anniversary Dinner. Thank you. Hello, my name is Tom Hogan, and this is the monthly Iowa Chapter and Cedar Rapids Rail Fans YouTube program. This is March of 2023, and we are doing a program from the Larry Anglund collection today. I am here, and I have Noah Bolte with me here as well. Say hello to everyone, Noah.
Hello.
So Noah and I are going to be narrating our way through the Iowa, Chicago, and Eastern, mostly in Eastern Iowa, with very few exceptions. And this is kind of a time frame of about 2010 through 2015, where there is a lot of the IC&E blue and yellow SD40s are still running around, some of the older Jeeps that they had, but you're starting to see some of the Canadian Pacific power filter its way in as well. And Noah, you were telling me how this was the time frame where you kind of started getting into rail fanning. Is that right?
Yeah. Because I got my first camera in late 2009. So this is right about the time where I really would have started branching out and shooting trains elsewhere, other than just here in Cedar Rapids. So, yep.
Sure. All right. Well, let us begin. So we have this IC&E railroad sign that I know has been safely preserved down in Ottumwa. It's no longer hanging at this exact location. But this was a crew change point down in Ottumwa for the Iowa, Chicago, and Eastern. They ran crews out of Ottumwa and Davenport or Nahant and Clinton and Savannah and Dubuque and Marquette in Eastern Iowa. And so we're going to see mostly the Ottumwa to Nahant and over toward the Illinois side of the Quad Cities as well in this program. And this is, I guess this is a little bit redundant, but just another little more signage just showing that the IC&E, to give everyone a little bit of history, it started up in 2002. It was previously the IMRL, which was owned and operated by the Dennis Washington Group, which also is actually just getting completely out of the railroad business. I just read this morning that the MRL is being turned back over to BNSF, and that's all been finalized here today as well.
I know they still have that one company out in British Columbia. I don't remember the name of it, but it's a smaller company. I think it actually works on is it Prince George Island? I don't recall, but there still is one more.
Yeah, it's an orphaned railroad out there with no outside connections. Yeah, I had forgotten
that's
about
one
that.
way to put it. Yeah.
So the DM&E bought the IMRL, renamed it the IC&E in 2002, and they operated it until 2008 when they were then purchased by the larger Canadian Pacific. And we'll get into that part of the program a little bit later as well. And here we are at the Nahant Yard, actually at the engine tracks in the Nahant Yard, and just some classic IC&E power. I don't know exactly how many SD40-2s that they rostered, but this is one of well over 100 that they had on the roster at the peak time.
Mm-hmm.
Very common, the yellow and blue striping, the city of Kelmer there on the side. A lot of the engines were in fact named, and they all had the 6000 numbering series for the SD40s, the 6-axle engines that were all 6000s, and the 4 axles and I should say, what did they do? They had Jeep 40s, those were 4 axles. They had Jeep 38s, those were 3800 series. The Jeep 40s were 4000 series, so pretty standard, all EMD power and all second generation EMD power, I should say.
So, and you can tell that was a former UP engine with the snoot nose there as well.
Oh yes,
and I think that engine actually survived onto what you could call IC&E's spiritual, follow up, which I guess would be RCP&E in a way. I think that engine's still out there kicking today.
Yeah, they're renumbered. They're in Genesee, Wyoming paint now. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a few of those SD40s did in fact make it back out to South Dakota. So, you make a great point also. There was a lot of former UP, former Mopac SD40s that were on the IC&E roster.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the DM&E side, you had lots of ex-Milwaukee Road, ex-CGW SD40s, and also some, why am I spacing this off now? Oh, the ex-Canadian Pacific SD40s that they managed to, you can actually see one back there, and the second one is it wasn't an X, it was a current SD40, CP SD40 at the time. But they sold off a bunch of CP SD40s, -2s and -3s to the DM&E, which they turned around and acquired right back when they purchased the DM&E Railroad. Yes.
That's kind of that CP has a tendency to do that, especially with like CMQ out east. Oh, they sell them a bunch of SD40-2Fs, and then wait, no, hold on, we're gonna take them back again. It's a reoccurring theme.
Yeah, and actually, really is.
I think this engine right here is actually one of the ex-CP ones. Look at the where the headlights. Actually, no, I don't see a bell on the cab. I don't know what this one is.
No, this 6200, I'm not sure. So the Milwaukee Road ones you could usually pick out because they had the shorter fuel tanks on them. This one, I am not sure. If someone wants to throw in the comments where this 6200 City of Huron came from, I'm not 100% sure what the heritage or lineage of that engine would have been. But it kind of does look like maybe if they moved the bell, it could have been an XCP engine.
I'm looking it up. Okay, so I don't know how accurate. Oh, it looks like according to couple roster websites I'm scrolling through. I'm seeing them referencing BC Rail on this actually.
Ah, I would
And I
not
guess
have
they
guessed that.
it used to have obviously, your pair of rock lights on it, and then also a headlight on the cab as well. But it looks like they got rid of those two parts. I did not know they had any former vehicle units. That is interesting.
Yeah, and now that I look at it closer, I can see where they blanked out that headlight spot in between the number boards. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
That makes more sense now. Yes.
So we were kind of close with the Canadian theme.
Yeah. All right. So pretty classic IC&E, DM&E type of consist here. A lot of the road trains were run north out of Nahant with two SD40s, often all the way up to St. Paul. South of Nahant with the bigger grades going down toward Ottumwa and Kansas City, they would run with 4 or 5 SD40s. And here we can see we've got, it looks like 3 IC&E SD40s and 1 DM&E SD40. And we're on the industry track here at Concord, in between Nahant and West Ave. And you can see the highway overpass and the branch line that went off to City Carton and Nichols Aluminum off there on the side as well. Mm-hmm. Now, another business that the IC&E got into very hot and heavy was these grain trains, and then later the ethanol trains, and in this case, this is a DDG train, which was, it's a grain train, but the DDGs, it's dried distiller grains. It's what's left over after the cracking process that creates ethanol. And they would run unit trains of these DDGs out of the ethanol plants and sell them out off to feedlots out in Colorado and Kansas and that area, where they were feeding thousands of head of cattle at one time. This guy is on the main line at Nahant, and you can see a switch engine way down there by the yard office, which the yard office at Nahant is now gone also. But the switch engine is sitting on the industry, which this is kind of a good indication of the heritage of it. This is former Rock Island double main. The switch engine is sitting on the old eastbound main, and the train is sitting on the old westbound main, and the Milwaukee actually had trackage rights through here, but then after the Rock Island bankruptcy, they took over the whole operation, West Ave all the way down to Culver Tower in Muscatine, and then eventually all the way on down to Washington when they abandoned their own line over Arden Hill. And so we were talking about the Jeeps that the IC&E rostered. This 4206, this would be a Jeep 40, and I want to say this was an XSP Jeep 40.
I would completely agree with you. I mean, you got the horizontal nose lights there. That's just a telltale sign, really, in my eyes.
These actually showed up with the bloody nose paint scheme, and then they went up to Horicon, I believe, or Mid-American Car, one of the two. I think they went up to Horicon and got repainted at one point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't remember them in Bloody Nose. I think the time where I gained my little child consciousness would have been probably just around the time these things just got repainted. Because I had plenty of family growing up in Comanche and Dubuque and whatnot. So I was alongside the tracks pretty constantly, like within a couple blocks even. So it was,
right.
I remember seeing these quite a bit.
Yeah, these were pretty common on the switch engines. This is at the Nahant Roundhouse. They had a 8-stall roundhouse that I think is still there but not being used. 8-stall roundhouse and turntable at Nahant down there on the west side of Davenport. And now here, this is by far and away the oldest power that was rostered on the IC&E. This is I want to say this is a 1954 Sioux Line Jeep. The Sioux Line heritage is obviously still very, very obvious.
Mm.
When the IMRL took over, the CP or the Sioux line basically said, just take these. We don't even want them. Just take them. And so they got about 5 Jeep 9s. And by this point, there were still 3 of them that were operating, the 114, 103, and 105. These actually started out life as passenger Sioux line Jeep 9s and would have had the steam boiler in the front, in the long hood or the short hood. It's the high hood there on the nose. And over time, they were very limited in how the IC&E used them. Eventually, all they did at the end was literally just run them on the switch engines in the yard and up the Nitron branch and back. And that was they were very much in captive service at Nahant at this time. And you can even tell they didn't even really bother to repaint it. They just put this neat little decal that I don't know that I've seen it used on any other engines other than the Jeep 9s, that they had this IC&E decal they slapped underneath the hood or underneath the window there on the cab.
Yeah, I don't think so. And those things were cool. Just imagine if they had got repainted, though. I mean, that would have been a pretty spiffy looking engine.
It would have been. What would you have done with the? I mean, you think about it. If we go to the way that the hood was painted and designed on those with the triangular or V-shaped stripe on the nose there, how that would have
Yeah,
looked on a high hood. Yeah.
that is a great question.
And here's 103 and 105. And I believe that we're actually in Silvis in this shot. I think we're at the Iowa Interstate because I believe that's the Silvis shops there in the background.
And you also see that all too common gas line indicator there and the white ballast. It's all kind of adding up.
Yeah. And these guys they would run over trackage rights on the Iowa Interstate or the BNSF. This was a throwback to dry line days when they still retained trackage rights on the Illinois side and the BNSF still retains trackage rights on the Iowa side. And part of making their moves up to Nitron and back to switch the customers on the Nitron line, they would also interchange cars with the Iowa Interstate at the Silvis yard.
Oh,
And so this guy, well, just one thing at a time here, Noah. This guy is coming off of the Nitron branch and getting ready to get back on off of home rails and back onto the BNSF industrial lead at 7th Street East Moline. But he's obviously pulled an engine out of NRE Silvis. And it's one of these Iowa Pacific F units. Or E units? I can't.
I would.
It's an E, yes.
Yeah.
So this is an Iowa Pacific E unit that was coming out of I believe it was getting repainted, and maybe they did some mechanical work also, but it came out of NRE Silvis. And it was going to the Iowa Pacific operation the part of the operation that was based out of Chicago at this time.
Hmm. Did not know any of those Reverend Silvis. That's cool.
Yeah. And here we're in Rock Island, as the name would imply, or the sign would imply. Another Nitron job. This guy has 2 NRE lease engines that, looking at the direction that he's going, I feel like that we're going towards Silvis. He's probably returning engines that are coming off lease and going back to NRE.
Yep.
And this was another common part of this operation as well, that they would interchange with the Iowa Interstate. They would have their tank cars are all going up the Nitron line to Cordova, and then they have these power moves that were going in and out of NRE Silvis. 44th Street, Rock Island. Here we're actually at the Iowa Interstate Rock Island yard, And this is the yard lead kind of going off to the left a little bit. And another day, and here we are at Taylor Street, or Missouri Division Junction in Davenport. This is on the Iowa side where they would get back off of the Iowa Interstate and head down the hill through Taylor Street and back down into the West Davenport yard. And you can see here, guy on the ground has lined the switch. If they were to continue going west, they would be going toward Iowa City on the Iowa Interstate. But they're getting off here to head down toward their own yard. They've got their train coming back from the Nitron branch. And this one is a DM&E Jeep 38, the Jeep, the 3801. And this one, I'm not as sure of the heritage. I'm not seeing any really telltale signs or anything obvious that makes me say exactly what it is. I do know that there was one Rock Island Jeep that was in DM&E paint, and we always knew that one because it still had the box for the cab signals down there on the engineer's side.
Oh. Huh.
It was all disconnected and disabled, but it had the actual cab signal apparatus was still mounted to the wall down there. And I don't remember if the 3801 was that one or if it was a different one.
Yeah, I honestly don't know this one either.
Yeah.
It's a little tough. But I do know that this one had like the so I don't know the official term for it, but on the cab, there's like a little bit of an indentation that kind of, well, not even indentation. It's just it's a little. There's slabs of steel on both sides of the window that kind of jut the cab forward a little bit. It's a little weird. I'm hoping we'll see a front view of this in a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. But that was kind of unique to a few of these engines, and Chicago Central had one of these too with the same type of cab. It's really, really bizarre to me.
Huh. I wonder if because a lot of those CCP engines came out as Paducah rebuilds. I'm wondering if that was something that was similar with this also then.
This was, I don't see anything that indicates to me it's a Paducah rebuild, but it definitely had just this really strange, you'll see, continue forward, we'll see.
Well, this is the Crescent Bridge, which is it's the former dry line bridge, which is now operated by the BNSF between Rock Island and Davenport. And you can see it with the curve coming off of the approach on the Illinois side. This is standing on the Iowa side looking toward Illinois. But this bridge was very common for use of trackage rights to get from the Iowa side to the Illinois side with the Nitron train. And this is looking downriver. What you can see here is you've actually got the Crescent Bridge open, and then further down you can see the roller dams, and then just beyond that is the Government Bridge where the Iowa Interstate crosses from Rock Island over to Davenport. And then in the middle, the Centennial Highway Bridge is the one with the big white arches on it. And here is a better view of the Government Bridge, which the Iowa Interstate uses, and it's somewhat unique in that it still has it's still a double-deck bridge, and car traffic on the lower deck and rail traffic on the top deck. And you can actually see the gate that they swing shut when the span has to be open for barge traffic. So, back over to this is another DM&E Jeep, and apparently we didn't get that shot of the 3801 that you wanted, but maybe we'll get it a little bit later. This would be
we'll see.
Yeah, this would be a DM&E 4000. This would be a Jeep 40. And again, not 100% sure on the heritage on this one, but this is just another example of switch engine power that you would have found at this time. And the 4006 getting serviced at Nahant as well. This one is actually the opposite. If you look at it, they left the headlights in place between the number boards and blanked out the headlight spot on the nose. So the opposite of that SP Jeep that we saw a little while back.
Yeah, I like the little blue flags up on the nose as well.
Mm-hmm. And the 4001, and this was brand new paint this day. This guy had just come out of the shop being repainted. And, looking at more identifying marks, you can actually see where this guy had class lights on the nose that have been blanked out now.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So it's not the one you were looking for, but the 3833, another Jeep 38 with the class lights on the nose, and we're looking at, I want to say that I just can't tell for sure, but I think that's another Jeep that he's connected to behind him also.
I would agree, because look how short the yeah, that's a Jeep.
Yeah, they're MU'd together, but they're definitely a pair of Jeeps working on the switching lead here. So we got the 3800.
There you go.
And is this is what you were looking for, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So why don't you detail this out a little bit now that we've got an actual front side view of it?
Well, so as we've been flicking through photos here, I've been trying to figure out the heritage on this thing, and I'm not exactly sure. I've seen a lot of things pointing towards early Conrail, like while it was still in a black and white scheme, or I guess black with a white logo, just CR.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these aren't showing the little, I guess, jutting out portion in the cab there. But then later on, I think it might have been rebuilt while at Conrail, but again, don't quote me on that. I'm just going off of what these pictures might be indicating. But yeah, really kind of a one-off or a two-off type thing on the roster. I didn't remember seeing too many of these. You've also got the little so I don't remember what the herald on the nose meant because it's way too faded to tell now, but that was some sort of commemorative unit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, if I'm zooming in on here, it's a 10-year commemorative, 1986 to 1996.
Ah, there you go.
And I believe the nose said something similar as well. Yes.
Yep.
So as we're going through and doing some more spotting guides on these, I would also point out this one had a dynamic brake grid that's been blanked out. If you look at the middle of the long hood there. So more modifications being made. And fairly beat up 3803 here. Desperately in need of some new paint, but no new paint was coming at this point. These Jeeps were all on their way out. Quite a few of them made it over to the Decatur in Eastern Illinois, I believe. Some of the 4000s, 4200s, I believe, made it over there.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4, something like that. Yeah.
Right. And you can see this one actually has the dynamic brake grid that has not been blanked out.
Mm-hmm. We've also got that weird cab on this one again.
Yes. I'm pretty sure, just looking at how much rust is on everything, I'm pretty sure this guy was on his last trip to whatever scrapper was willing to buy him at this point in his life.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The 6452, this would have been another XUP snoot nose engine. And this one, I want to say 6452. I want to say that this guy, I mean, if you look at it, I think this one might have even had one of the bigger fuel tanks on it as well.
Could be.
Yeah. But again, talk about the heritage of it. These, when you're looking for it, the long nose with the XUP that had all the extra radio equipment up there in the front end. That's why they built those the way that they did.
See, I'm not entirely convinced that this was UP because if you look up on the nose there, you kind of see like a little bit of a. There's actually a nose light kind of jutting out, just a little bit. It's kind of hard to make out, but I don't see a cab light. I see a little bit of a nose light, so I'm actually confused about what this one was. I'm not too sure.
Well, it could have been an X Mopac also, I suppose.
Yeah, but those had cab lights too, so I'm not. I'm kind of googling this as we're talking here.
All right. Well, we can come back to it.
It looks like this was another one of the Beagle ones, apparently.
Oh.
I really didn't realize they rostered many of those.
A B-Col. Wait, so a B-Col, so BCOL is what we're talking about. With a snoot nose and with an SD40. That's interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Would not have guessed that either.
And I'm looking at pictures of it like while it was still owned by BC Rail, and it looks, proportionally, the nose and everything, it all looks the same.
All right.
So, yeah, that must have been what this was.
Well, I'll buy that. 6370 here with some mismatched number boards out at Bettendorf. And he is sitting on the Bettendorf siding. It looks like with no crew on, so that he's dead waiting for a new crew to come out and drag him into Nahant. And you can see the old Interstate 80 bridge going over the top there, which has since been replaced. And I believe it looks like a couple lease units behind there also, but didn't get a great look at that. And so now what we're starting to see here is we're sneaking in a Sioux Line Jeep, the 4601 there in the background. So we're starting to get to the part of the program here where we're going to start seeing more of that CP power and Sioux Line power making appearances as well. And so this is another one. This may have been BC, this front view, this might have been BC Rail as well.
I'm wondering that.
Because there's not even a fixture for headlights up there in between the number boards. That is just 100% nose light.
Well, let's see. Apparently this was former NREX, former Canadian Pacific. So I guess they must have knocked out the bell there where the headlights would have been had it been a BC Rail unit. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Also knocked out the class lights, unfortunately, but there were a few of them that actually retained them. If you remember that.
Yes, there definitely were. And here we have another southbound. This guy's on the main at Nahant, Concord Street again, and two SD40s and a IC&E Jeep 40 there in the background, the 4204. And I do believe that 4204 is one of them that migrated over to the Decatur and Eastern Illinois, as we were talking about previously. And these 6400s, which were the IC&E numbered units, these are some of them that you were talking about that made it out to the Genesee, Wyoming property that's now Rapid City, Pierre and Eastern, RCPE. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the UP ones ended up surviving.
Right. And I think we got a duplicate slide in here. I may have gotten, so the pair of SD40s here, it looks like on a grain train, and we're going to start making our way over to the Nahant Roundhouse, and there was lease power running around at this time also. A couple examples of CITX SD40s that were also on the property at this time. And you can actually see one is in the Roundhouse and one is out here on the Roundhouse lead. And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do not know where these lease engines were there at the very, very end of the IC&E operation. And then basically as soon as the lease came up, the CP returned them. because they still had hundreds of their own SD40s. They didn't need any lease power running around.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, for lease locomotives, at least the ones the IC&E slash, I guess, going into Canadian Pacific era, the ones they had, for lease engines, a lot of them looked pretty decent, at least paint scheme wise. I mean, I always, you know, normally lease engines are kind of a mixed bag. Some people like seeing them, some don't, because it ruins the, you know, otherwise uniformity of a railroad's consist. But I actually thought they had some pretty neat leasers. You know, the FURX ones, the green and silver. You got these blue ones. You had the white ones. They were kind of cool.
Yeah, we don't have any shots of them in here, but when the IC&E first started up, they had a whole fleet of XBN SD40s.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yep, green, and those disappeared. I don't think that any of them got repainted. I think that they all just disappeared as these UP and Mopac engines came online that were actually painted IC&E on delivery. And
there we go.
Yeah, here's another example. This CITXer, and you have an obvious XCP rail. You know, some of these actually survived in the dual flag scheme also, all the way to the DM&E. But so you have it's a DM&E 6089, but it is actually came from CP rail. These were SD40-3s, and they actually pulled really, really well. But they still had the class lights in place. You can see the bell up there in between the number boards, which is what we were alluding to earlier. And then that really pretty sharp-looking lease unit, that CITX lease unit, in the green and silver in the back there, too.
And, you know, since you would have worked on some of these, can you tell me, were these engines, I guess cherry bomb, as people would nickname them, were they like a little bit shorter? Because the frames always looked kind of small to me compared to other SD40s, and I don't know why.
I don't think that they had the long. So the classic look of the SD40 is with the really long walkway or gangway off of the ends, especially the back end of the locomotive, but the front end also. And I think that the CP units, I think they had shorter gangways on each end of the engine.
Oh, sure.
And that's where you're getting that perception from, yes. 6092.
This is a good example of that.
Yeah, you can actually see it really obvious right there. Shorter gangways for walking around the front and back of the locomotive. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we've got a Gray Ghost out here second out, although I don't know that it got chopped off a little bit. Pretty sure that's a KCS engine.
Soon to be KCS. At the time, that would have been a TFM because of the lack of the nose logo there.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. And there's a dual flag. There's actually, so we got them both. Look at this. I didn't think that there were any BN leasers in here, but here's the 7003, which was an FURX lease unit from the BN. And then we also have we also have the dual flag CP rail engine that just has CP painted over. So, what were you going to say there, Noah?
No, I just said rail system. It's straight to the point, pretty much mirroring what you said about the Canadian Pacific part just being, you know, completely blocked out.
Uh-huh. DM&E rail system, is that how we're supposed to read that?
Yeah, exactly.
This one I included, I believe, because this was an ex-Milwaukee Road engine.
Oh.
Evidenced by the shorter fuel tank, that big gap there between the front truck and the fuel tank. I do know that the DM&E rostered a handful, maybe as many as 9 or 10 ex-Milwaukee Road SD40s. And this would have been one of them, I believe. And oh yes, this was pretty unique also. This City of Sleepy Eye, and then it actually had the artwork, the Native American artwork there below it as well. but named after
Yeah.
Sleepy Eye, Minnesota.
It's neat. I kind of forgot that locomotive existed out of, the special interest units, I guess, from both railroads. That was kind of one of the overshadowed by, coincidentally enough, this one.
Yes, the very next slide in the slideshow is the Mount Rushmore Heritage Unit. And this was painted for the 50th anniversary of Mount Rushmore. And it was the DM&E 6359, which I believe was another ex-Milwaukee Road SD40.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, they had some really neat paint schemes going on, not just the standard block lettering, blue and yellow. There was a lot of unique stuff. And this was also the 25th anniversary of the DM&E, I want to say.
Think so.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that decal's been peeled off now, but this one was used extensively in pulling around their two business cars that they had that were painted blue and gold. And additionally, there was the fall colors trips that they would do. This is the locomotive that would almost always get pulled out to run those kinds of trips and excursions whenever Kevin Schieffer felt like he needed to tour the railroad.
So, and I think this might be worth noting. So this one I think had dynamics added in because I don't think it initially had it. And this would have been, I believe, one of the former Rock Island units you were talking about, as evidenced by that little, see the bell on the side of the long hood there? I'm kind of thinking that this is one of the Rock Island ones.
Yeah, there were a handful of these Rock Island units that I don't know if they ever went through Olwine or not, but they definitely ended up on the DM&E roster. Because the DM, so to just kind of bring this whole thing full circle here, the DM&E was a spin-off of the C&W. The C&W got a lot of ex-Rock Island power, which they ran through Olwine, rebuilt, and redeployed into various places across the system. And when the DM&E started up, they started up with a number of engines that the C&W was just trying to get rid of. Alco power and just a whole mismatch hodgepodge of stuff. And this Rock Island power may have gotten to them that way.
Right.
Davis Junction, so we are over in Illinois now, and making more of a tour of the railroad. So this is where Illinois RailNet crosses the now Canadian Pacific at Davis Junction. This train is actually running. Eastbound, I believe, and he's about to cross the north and south line of the Illinois RailNet. And this would be the IPSCO job. We're actually going by the Lafarge cement plant and heading toward IPSCO, although on this... Yeah, he's got two SD40s. I thought for some reason he had a Jeep there for a moment. No. He has two SD40s.
I think that second SD40 might be one of those former CP ones that kind of looked, a little smaller. I'm guessing that's why we thought that for a second.
Well, I saw the numbers there on the back hood.
Sure.
And that's what threw me for a minute, but it's the 6083. 6088 and 6083. That's why. And it was very common to see these guys go up to IPSCO with two SD40s twice a day, every day, with loads of scrap steel that would get melted down and recycled, and then it would come back out on these empty flat cars as plate steel or steel coil, but it's a steel recycling outfit up there. And this is another IPSCO train with all these loads of steel scrap, but it has that one hopper, which I forget, they had some chemical or some material that they needed as part of the recycling process that they would very, very rarely get a hopper load of whatever this was. I don't remember exactly what the commodity was. That they would have to get this hopper load. And one hopper load would last them like 6 months. So it was pretty rare to catch this. So this guy is on the industry track, and you're looking at, there's actually a southbound train there getting ready to pull by on the main line. And another IPSCO train, and it looks like he is on the main. But again, going up to IPSCO with two ST40s. The 6093 was another one that was pretty neat. Had the class lights that survived in it as well. And this is actually at the Montpelier control point, which was it's the end of where the double main was left in place. And you can just kind of barely tell he's crossing over from the industry to the main, and then he's going to diverge up the hill to IPSCO right after this.
So what are those hoppers behind it about then?
Oh, you're right. No, this is not an IPSCO train. This guy is just leaving. Oh, he's got an SD60. Look at that. I didn't even catch that at first. He's got an SD60 leading.
But it does look very IPSCO-like the farther back you get in the train.
It does.
I don't know. I'm kind of confused about this one.
No, those are... I'm not sure. Either way, this guy is definitely crossing over and heading south, but he may not be heading up to IPSCO.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, this was... Before the CP started rebuilding SD60s, at a certain point they were just repainting SD60s, and this would have been a SU 60. It probably would have started out as the 6054, and then they renumbered it to 6254 when they repainted it.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually ascending the hill at IPSCO. Pretty classic spot here. Lots of empty flat cars with that same pair of SD40s we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. You can just hear the noise from this picture.
I know, can't you? You can just... It really was... I mean, you were just sitting there in Notch 8, just pounding your way up the hill. And it's a 2% grade going up this hill, like 2.1% grade. And 3 reverse curves as you're ascending. So if you look all the way at the top right of the screen, you can see a little white signal shack up there. That's actually at the level of the track up there higher. So to give you an idea of how much the grade ascends as you go around this next curve, it's something ridiculous. Like there's like 35 feet of climb just from where that engine is right now to where that shack is up on top of the next curve.
Wow, that's not even including, the part of the hill they've already climbed up. So it's climbing its own height, like what, 4 or 5 times at least?
Yeah, easily.
Wow.
Here, well, we're at the south end of Nahant now. This guy is coming back from IPSCO, and he's lining himself back into the yard, and he's crossing over from the main to the industry here to go back into the yard. Different day, different set of power, it looks like. And this would be a stone train picture. So the stone train would generally work overnights and go out and switch like we showed that Lafarge cement plant earlier. And these cars, there would be limestone cars, sugar beet cars, all kinds of stuff out there. A lot of industries. Cement hoppers, you can see kind of some of those shorter cement hoppers that are further back. That would have all been cars out of Lafarge cement. And we would be remiss if we did not mention the KCS in this program. Actually, prior to the Canadian Pacific buying the IC&E, the KCS had a contract agreement with what they called were bullet trains, that they would hand off power and grain hoppers to Kansas City, or to the Kanoki yard in Kansas City. They would get interchanged. And the IC&E would have a certain amount of time. I don't remember exactly what it was, but basically they were supposed to get the cars up to a elevator or several elevators on the Mason City sub, get them all loaded, and then get them back to Kansas City within a certain number of hours. And this is why they were called bullet trains, because they were really hot, high priority moves. And what we would get is you would see these solid sets of these black KCS hoppers when they started coming out in about 2007 or 2006 even, maybe.
Yep, that's right around the time the company started, adopting the Southern Bell scheme on things.
Right. And then sometimes you'd get them with a pair of Southern Bell Gevos coming up with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
very eye-catching.
Yeah, it really was. It was pretty sharp looking. So what would happen is you'd have a 100-car grain train that would get divided up 25 cars apiece to 4 different elevators, all get set out, tie the power down, and then 12 hours later they'd cab another crew out and work their way back east, pick up the cars, and then head on toward Dubuque with the grain train to get it back to Kansas City. This would be on the Eldridge Spur. There's a spot called Waterworks, which is in downtown Davenport along River Drive. And the Eldridge Spur split off. It went up about 7 miles, although not all the way to Eldridge at this time. And he's got 2 flats for John Deere to load forestry equipment on out of Mount Joy.
I think this might have been an XSP GP40X or maybe even XUP. I'm not too sure, but you see the wings, the flared radiators back there. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I see that too. I wonder too if this was this after the CP had started rebuilding Jeeps, that maybe that's why it had it?
Maybe, but I know whatever the case, I remember for sure that I think there were 4 or 5 of these on the CP roster, and they all came like that, at least with the wings. Now I think the nose might have got rebuilt because there's no there's no logo up there, and it's a slightly different shade of red. So
yeah,
I'm not too sure about its actual heritage. I want to say UP or SP though. That's
okay.
My first 2 guesses.
And here we have an actual Sioux Line Jeep, 4412. Another day, but again with 2 flats for John Deere and Mount Joy. Heading up the branch line. Class lights still intact as well.
Mm-hmm. And the beacon.
Yep. And this would be an example of the BNSF Clinton job that would come out of the Barstow yard over on the Illinois side, very close to where the Silva shops are. And they would always run up 4-axle power across to the Iowa side and up to Clinton because they had to have 4-axle power to negotiate the curves at ADM in Clinton.
See, at first I thought this might be one of those Smurf locomotives, but you look at it and it's got EMDX reporting marks. So I'm not too sure what this locomotive's history is with BNSF, but that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I believe this was when they were just starting to repaint these swooshes paint swooshes onto the sides of the logo on the locomotive also for the Jeep. The second Jeep, I should say.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Here's another derivation of it. But again, pair of 4-axle power, and then if you look further back there are tarped loads, which I believe is aluminum for Alcoa on those bulkhead flats further back. And there were quite a few Muscatine Power and Water coal trains that would get handed off to the IC&E at Ottumwa, and then they would bring them up to Muscatine Power and Water to be unloaded there. But this one, I mean, how can you go wrong, right? We've got an executive Mac with the wagon wheel. I mean, I guess you can go wrong, but the executive Mac with the wagon wheel logo still intact on the nose. So,
we're not going to be too picky here.
yeah.
I think it's a cool train. Yeah.
And another coal train. This guy is actually in the Ottumwa yard getting ready. He's run around his train and he's ready to head north now to head up to Muscatine Power and Water, I believe.
So at this time, who would have been serving the Louisa generating station? Because the Muscatine area has 2 power plants.
Right. The Muscatine Power and Water is run by the city of Muscatine. Louisa Generating is run by Mid-American. For a long time, those trains came off of the connection with the UP at Comanche.
Right.
And came down that direction. At some point, they flipped over. I don't know if maybe the reason he was down there was because this was one of the first Mid-American trains that showed up. Because I do remember that the Mid-American car sets would have had these red ends painted on them. So this might actually be a Mid-American train, but maybe one of the first ones that showed up.
Sure.
And what do we have? An SD70M there on the front leading?
Yeah, SD70 Mac, and then looks like I believe an AC Jevo, one of the first ones they had. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the beginning of CTC. There's a very short stretch of CTC there at Ottumwa. Of course, now it's being expanded, but basically from the yard lead across the connection and the diamond with the BNSF and up to the Rutledge siding, and about 7 or 8 miles of CTC up there. And so this was the beginning of that, and a very well used Milwaukee Road searchlight signal right here. And the IC&E did have its own cars in their own reporting marks as well. Some of it was grain hoppers, but some of it was these flat cars that were in service for SSAB or IPSCO to move plate steel around. And then some coil cars also, I believe. And a DM&E company gone. This would have been a maintenance wagon, but still, I did always kind of like this blue with white lettering, the speed lettering that they had there on the sides.
And of course, it matches the blue of the Clinton Bridge back there, so
That's
always
right.
works out.
This would have been a scrap gon. These IC&E gons would have been in scrap service for going up to SSAB as well. And you can tell by just how badly beaten this one is. How badly beaten up this one is. Sorry. I knew I was going to get that out correctly eventually. That these IC&E gons were pretty much exclusively in scrap service. And we managed to catch some Rock Island cars as well. And obviously this was a lease car also, but you did see a fair number of Rock Island, XC&W hoppers. There was a fair amount of these that were still rolling around. And these DM&E coal hoppers, these went out to get loaded with sugar beet rock out there where we looked at originally the Stone Train area. And this is back at the Nahant Yard again, but this would have been, I forget what this would have started out life as, but it was a coal hopper that they converted for the sugar beet rock operation.
Yeah.
And then a riprap car. This came out of Dubuque, actually. They would dynamite riprap out of a spot called Rose's Spur north of Dubuque. And then send it to wherever it went. Now you can see this one. It still shows the IC&E reporting marks, but it's been stenciled CP rail also. So you can kind of tell the harbinger of what's coming.
Neat little car.
Yeah. And there's the actual dual flag logo, although pretty well weathered. But when we were talking about it earlier, this is what it looks like when the folks in Huron haven't started repainting it. This is the actual CP Rail dual flag logo. And you're starting to see more indications of the Canadian Pacific takeover of IC&E. You've got a unpatched CP SD40, and then if you look really far down there on the tail track up toward West Ave, you can actually see the long hood end of a CP AC 4400 also.
I see that.
And eventually, these all started to go away, and you ended up with just IC&E power became harder and harder to find, and the CP power became much more prevalent. Now, this is up at Savannah, and we have, I believe this was the first iteration of the holiday train after the CP took over the DM&E. Because I think there was only 1 year where they led it with an SD40, with a blue SD40.
Yeah.
And then later years, we have a couple of years later, this is another holiday train, but this one is just being led by the CP motor. And what are we at here? 120? Is that what that mile marker says? So we're over on the Chicago sub again on this time as well, somewhere east of Savannah. And the Sebula drawbridge with the holiday train with the full light display on the side, traversing the bridge from Illinois to Iowa. And a couple shots of that. And now downtown Davenport. And I don't know, this doesn't really look like downtown Davenport to me. I'm not sure where this shot was taken.
I don't know.
But now we're back over on we're back over at Missouri Division Junction, but you're seeing more so the Iowa Interstate obviously has a huge tie project that they're going to work on, but you're seeing more of this CP Jeeps and CP power along with the DM&E and IC&E power as well.
Yeah, we're really kind of entering the transition period here, huh?
Mm-hmm. And this guy, I'm pretty sure he had a dynamic brake grid fire.
Mm.
Pretty sure that dyno grid is completely melted, and that was the reason that he's got the battery box pulled now. It looks like the air compressor's been pulled out. This guy has definitely been parted out. So this is unfortunately the fate of many of the SD40s, is that once they had any sort of major repair that needed done, they just pulled them out of service. There was no resuscitating SD40s at this point. And quite frankly, the CP had too many of them. The IC&E and DM&E had too many of them. They just didn't need this many locomotives anymore. So another CP rail SD40. Class lights intact again, always good to see. And so one of the other, shall we say, benefits of this is that some of the bandits started making their way back down to Nahant, which would have been their old stomping ground as well. This Sioux 2010, you can very clearly see, started out life as a Milwaukee Road Jeep. And then we have a rebuilt CP 4526 over here on the side as well. This is at West Davenport, the Schmidt Road, West Davenport, East End lead there.
Mm-hmm. I remember that 2010, and the other one I think that would frequent the area was 2066, I want to say. I remember them both just very frequently being on Nahant or West Dav yard jobs, yeah.
Yep, and they ended up down in Muscatine quite a bit also. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And there is the 2066, as you were talking about. And Can't really make out the Milwaukee Road on it, but definitely make out that orange and black paint that it started out life with. And a Sioux Line Jeep, but here, you know, we fully transitioned, right? Now there's no DM&E, IC&E power at all. We're completely over to Sioux Line and Canadian Pacific. And you can see this 4614 is one of them that actually got repainted with the Beaver logo with a as a Jeep 38, I believe. Yeah.
I think so.
And another one, this one dual flag, but still pretty nice looking Jeep on the, we're at Moline on the Nitron job again.
Yeah, the cab looks a little funky though, like just above the windows. You see what I mean? It's like a little bit of a kind of thinner looking than
Yes.
some of the other. Yeah.
And there's the 2066 again, leading the Nitron job. We're over at 7th Street East Moline. This is the actual switch where you divert off to go up to Nitron, or you go straight. Well, no. Sorry. You go to the far left, you go up to Nitron, you go straight and you go to the Barstow to BNSF, and you go right and you go to Silvis on the Iowa Interstate. That's how it was set up.
Mm-hmm. It looks like we've got our first GP20C Eco showing up second out there.
Yes.
I'm looking at it.
That's right, with the 2000 series. Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's always weird to see those, you know, bandits mixed with those. You wouldn't think that happened, but it did for a little bit.
Right. Here you can actually see the track arrangement much better. Those flats are actually for combines over on the John Deere Harvester Works there in East Moline. And then going to the far right is the Iowa Interstate. The Sioux Line engine is on the former Milwaukee Road or the Nitron line. And then going through the center is the BNSF going toward the Barstow sub. And look at who we found here. There's a railroad employee talking to a future railroad employee right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that we're over in front of Tom Ference's house over on the Thompson, Illinois side. These MP15s were actually also Milwaukee Road engines that made their way back down to Nahant as well. I don't know how they got renumbered, but the Sioux Line acquired some, through the Milwaukee Road merger, they acquired some MP15s as well.
Those were neat looking.
Mm-hmm. And here you can see a little bit of everything. We've got the BNSF, looks like waiting his turn. We've got the Sioux Line, or the CP, ready to come back from Nitron. So everybody's just sitting here waiting to see who the dispatcher is going to let out first. And you can see that the fuel tank there in the background is starting to get a bit faded. We're going to come back to that a little bit later as well. This one, a Pac-Man SD40 off of the CP. Those were fairly rare by 2009, 2010 as well. And the STLH, I'd forgotten I'd put this in the program. St. Lawrence and Hudson Railway, actually. But another subsidiary of the CP.
Not a very long-lasting one, if I remember correctly.
No, not at all. And here you see, you wanted to talk about those Jeep 20 Eco rebuilds. Here is a fine example of one right next to this Milwaukee Road or Sioux Line 2066. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this was the first one that came out, but it was definitely brand spanking new at this particular point.
Absolutely. Oh, and there's another one of those former GP 40X. Now, I don't remember if CP classified them that way. That's why I say former, but definitely started out life as one.
Right.
Without a doubt.
So if you look at the side of the cab now, they're classifying it this time as a GP 38-2. And here's an SD30 Eco rebuild. And this was another rebuild program that the CP embarked on, but it was with the SD40s instead of the Jeeps. And then you got that Pac-Man SD40 over there behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the Nahant Roundhouse and a Sioux Line Jeep 4411 here. Jeep 38, I believe, with no dynamic brakes. And then the Sioux SD60s. These were some of the better power that we got that came down after the merger. That I think one of the very first things that they did was they started pulling these SD60s out of storage and started sending them down south for us to use, primarily between Nahant and Kansas City. And man, they wheel slipped a lot, but they were interesting to run for sure. And here we have an SD60 rebuild. This one, SD60 wide cab rebuild. And again, I think this would have started out as a 6058 and got renumbered to a 6258.
Mm-hmm. I've seen lots and lots of Sioux heritage throughout this whole program, which I expected, but it's nice to see, especially how few are left these days.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how many of them got it, but this is an AC4400 that got the dual flag paint scheme. And I just don't know that there were very many of those that ever saw that particular livery.
So I want to say the first 50 to 100 of them that got that, like the first order, basically, because you can just tell from looking at this that it was, the very first order they put in for that.
This guy's been running through the tunnels in British Columbia most of his life. And here's an actual pair of SD60 rebuilds, but with the standard cabs. But again, at the Nahant Roundhouse here, taking a ride on the turntable, it looks like.
I wonder if that first one might have been repainted over at NRE, because I know they did that for a lot of the Sioux 60s.
Yeah. Here we have an IPSCO train that's actually, he's building his train. You had a track of flat cars over here on one side, and you got a track of scrap loads on the other, and they would call in their order. They want so many loads of scrap and so many empty flats, so many empty coil cars, whatever they were looking for, and these guys would come out and put the train together and then run up to IPSCO with it. And another shot, this one's over in Clinton, but we've got this 2225 that seemed to have lived down in eastern Iowa for a while. And the 4412. And this is at West Davenport, another CP switch engine, 4437 this time. And the beginning of the signaling system there at West Davenport, or at least at this time, the beginning of the signaling system, because this is all getting upgraded and it's going to, they're going to have signaling from Clinton all the way down to Kansas City at some point in the not too distant future. And we're outside of town. This is actually between Bettendorf and LeClaire. But now we are fully CP Canadian Pacificized with a pair of AC4400s running probably a 171 type train. I think that's how they numbered them at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And same train again, a little further north. I think we're north of LeClaire, maybe closer to Princeton here. And the CP grain hoppers with Sioux Line reporting marks. Another fairly common occurrence. And another thing, the upgrades of the welded rail. We're back at Davis Junction here. And this is a westbound at Davis Junction, but a loaded rail train, indicative of the upgrades that the CP started to take on after they purchased the DM&E. And we're seeing an SD40, well, SD30 rebuild, they call them, and an SD40 trailing. And just a pair of, well, the first one is a DM&E CP because it's renumbered to 6093. It would have started out as a 5000 series when it was in Canadian Pacific paint originally.
Mm-hmm.
And a loaded oil train. This was another one that, another thing, you know, some of the overhead traffic that the CP started to send down this way. This is an empty oil train. I apologize. This is going north. There's the Modern Woodman Ballpark, minor league baseball stadium over there in the background you can see. So this guy's going north, downtown Davenport. And eventually the roundhouse started to get shut down as well. This guy is parked on the roundhouse lead, but you can see the stalls are empty. And I don't think that the roundhouse at Nahant is really used at all anymore. And as a final stroke, they repainted the fuel tanks to Canadian Pacific instead of IC&E. And here you can see we've got Canadian Pacific Power and Canadian Pacific fuel tank, and there's CP Power in the background, and we're fully Canadianized at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We have a SD60 and a DM&E SD40 here, pulling an empty welded rail train, going back to be reloaded, it looks like.
Those SD60Ms are always kind of hard to come by because I think there were only like, what, 5 of them?
Yeah,
something like that.
Pretty rare. Yeah. Yep. And of course, you started to see more run-through power as well, because the CP would just send power wherever to pay back horsepower hours. And here we have a couple of SD40s, but then followed up with 3 modern BNSF units. I think they're all GEs. I think that we've got. Yeah, those are all GEs. They're quite new at this point, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Trio -9s.
Yep. And some NS power, again on a road train going through downtown Davenport. Actually got an older SD60 leading, but then the IC&E SD40 and then a NS. Is that one of their AC to DC rebuilds?
No, this would have been way before that program started. That's just just a stock wide cap -9 they had, yeah.
Gotcha.
Although of note in here, that 6053, that was not the last Sioux Line SD60, but the last Candy Apple Sioux Line SD60 to be in that paint. Now I don't know, at this time I'm sure there were others, but that was basically the last one, if I remember correctly. This one or 52, one of the two.
All right. Another shot of them approaching West Davenport, the Purina Nestle plant there in the background. And an indication of things to come, we have a KCS engine leading a CP engine, a couple of CP engines on a road train. Looks like coming into Nahant this time. And there you can see the DM&E 4000 hiding down there in the background, but the CP paint on they've completely repainted the fuel tank at this point, so. And then you have the deadline. This is the Nahant deadline, and you've seen these SD40s that are getting taken out of service and ready to be shipped elsewhere. A couple of those Jeep 9s we talked about earlier, another SD40, and then it looks like 2 MP15s down there at the end of the line. But this was the point where they were starting to allow just leases to expire, or looking for buyers, or figuring out where these engines were going to go after they ended their life on the Canadian Pacific. And another indication, this is actually, it looks like they've got all the lease power lined up on this one. Probably lining it up, getting ready to go back to CITX at this point.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of, I remember that period. It's kind of sad.
It is. And here we can see, we're talking about these Jeeps that went to HLCX. I had forgotten about this. So the HLCX is Helm Leasing. And by way of Helm Leasing, these were all ex-IC&E Jeep 40s that I believe several of them ended up in the Decatur and Eastern Illinois.
If you look on the long hood there, you've got the that indication that this was one of those SP units with that big bulky
Yeah.
headlight setup at the top. Yeah.
Yep, I see that. And just a side view, you can see everything's been painted over, and they're literally just getting ready to move them on to Helm Leasing, get them off the property. And this is actually, I believe that this is on the BNSF near Galesburg, but this is these Jeeps being delivered. So, and we got a white-faced Triclops here leading, so couldn't pass up the opportunity to include that.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And that dash 8.
This was another one that found a new home, IMRR, which you can, I believe this is down in Decatur, actually. Illinois Midland Railroad.
You've got that. I don't remember what the heck they're called, but those one of a kind or two of a kind locomotives that was trailing behind it.
Yeah. And then this I believe is now over in Peoria, or not Peoria, Decatur, where this has been delivered with a, well, he's hooked up to a CSX wedge ditcher here, but he's not a wedge plow, but a ditcher. But I believe this is actually in Decatur after it's been delivered. And the Sioux 60s ended up getting sent off the property as well. This is another shot from near Galesburg, but you see this Sioux 6007, which has been renumbered or relettered to CFEX and heading off to a new home as well. And this would be a shot coming into West Davenport, but we have a solid set of CP or former CP SD40s here pulling a road train. And eventually, this is the wave of the future, right? All GE power, all brand new. Well, not brand new, but all newer GE power getting delivered and working the various jobs at the Nahant yard. Oh, this was just another repaint that I put in here that had a nice shot of the beaver pelt logo on the side.